Okay. J's like a Y. No, that's fine. People get along all the time. How you doing, Fred? Good to see you. Well, you're about to see. It's going to get a whole lot funner in a moment. Matt, how you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Long time. I think we're going to get started, so and we can talk afterwards. We're going to go ahead and start it, I think. Right?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Ben Smith. I'm AFCEA's Homeland Security Manager. I'm just going to introduce our speaker, Mr. Drew Jaehnig, the Chief of the Fourth Estate Network Optimization at DISA, here to talk about his organization and what they're doing there. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Drew Jaehnig here to the podium. Thank you.
Forgotten how noisy this can be. So, good afternoon. Everybody enjoying AFCEA so far? Yeah? So far so good? Yeah? Admiral Norton's speech, good? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. All right, well, a little bit about me. So if I go back a few years ago, and this is kind of a story you'll understand and why it's pertinent in a moment, but back in 1991, I was in the Navy and finishing up my third tour in the Gulf, and people asked me, well, what did you do in the Navy? And the answer was, well, I cleared mines for a living, and that's the truth, to be honest. I did 3 tours on the Gulf clearing mine danger areas, and it's kind of funny because when I came to work for DISA several years later, many people remember Cindy Moran. Do you remember Cindy Moran? Right. Cindy Moran famously said to me, well, compared to that, this is stress-free. I would argue, yes, you're about to see, compared to that, this is stress-free. But, you know, as they say in the minesweeping world, it's somewhat boring until it isn't. Hopefully the session won't bore you all. But nonetheless, we're here to talk about something that's getting a lot of interest. And I want to make sure that we demystify some of what Fourth Estate network optimization is versus what it isn't. There's been some talk and scuttlebutt wandering around about things, and we want to try to set the record straight and get everybody kind of cleared up on what's going on with the Fourth Estate. Before I do that, I'm going to do a shameless plug, though. We do have an RFI on the street, opened on Friday. So if you're looking out at Fed Biz Ops, you can find it out there with keyword Fourth Estate or 4ENO. And there's also a video that's been posted on the DISA YouTube site. It should be, right now it's at the top of the pile, but of course as AFCEA progresses, it'll move further down. But it explains a good chunk of what's in the RFI and what's coming next. So I encourage all of our vendor partners out there to go out and look at the RFI. We're looking for as much response and information as we can glean from that. This brief will help further clarify what we're doing. But let's go ahead and kind of get into the meat. So what is Fourth Estate network optimization? Okay, fundamentally, the strategy from the department is we're looking at common use IT, or in industry vernacular, commodity IT, right? So your basic IT services all the way down to the desktop for these 14 agencies. So right now, each one of these agencies kind of has its own LAN, administrative LAN, its own network, its own service desk, its own DISA connections. And if you look at places like, say the McNamara building down at Fort Belvoir, you have a campus environment down there where in one building, or actually 2 buildings if I count DITRA's building, there are 7 different agencies operating independently in one building. The department's thought pattern here, and there's kind of a theme going through this, right? Department's thought pattern here is that we're going to be able to save significant amount of money and return that to lethality for the department by combining these networks and reducing the footprint to the tune of about $170 million a year, right? So that's kind of the goal. In fact, I like to say that my deliverable for the department isn't the new service, it's the savings. Now, having said that, there are kind of 3 key pillars related to this. Improved processes, service, which we like to describe the following way, and some people in the industry agree with me on this kind of concept. The service is really a combination of technology and processes to deliver an experience, right? And then, of course, there's the network itself and what we're about to do with the network. As you can imagine, it's a pretty diverse set of mission sets in there, pretty diverse set of requirements. One of the questions that we're already getting is, how is this different than, say, AFNet or NMCI? And the answer is kind of going towards a more COI-like environment, right? There's a baseline set of services that are going to be provided, but I have to deviate based on the wide variety of mission sets that we have in the sector. For example, DFAS doing its DFAS mission for finance and accounting, very different animal than DPAA, who is the POW and MIA accountability agency. Very different set of requirements. DPAA is out in the jungles in Laos trying to find the remains of U.S. soldiers. DFAS doesn't do anything like that, right? So you kind of get the general gist. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Right, so fundamentally, the primary reform goal, as I stated before, is to get at the cost savings to increase lethality. But also we want to harden the cyber presence. So again, when you have that many networks in the space, you're talking about differing levels of cyber hardening, and there's some difficulty in there with regards to the economies of scale or lack thereof. So if you're a small agency, for example, roughly 350 folks in some of these agencies, you can imagine the size of the budget. In fact, many of these small agencies struggle to actually have a budget. They run on unfunded requirements and whatnot. This makes it hard for them to keep current with all of the cyber capabilities that need to be deployed to protect the department. Can we back up one, please? Right, so that's kind of one of the benefits of doing this is once we kind of combine that whole presence, it enables us to actually start to do the economies of scale and aggregate that cost across the entire sector, right? So on top of the fact that we're going to be, yielding cost savings, and we're going to be going with this cyber protection aspect, we're also going to improve the service, right? In fact, we like to say that basically what we're looking for here is better service, lower cost, and hardened infrastructure. So that's really what you should be taking away from this. Now, having said that, if we go to the next slide, you can kind of see how the pillars start to break down, right? So DISA has been designated as a single service provider for this program. If you're asking me, or you stop me afterwards and ask me, well, where is that written? The answer is there is a memo that's in motion. It's not quite signed yet, but it is in motion. But that's where DOD CIO is asking us to go. And with DISA being a single service provider, our task will be to take all of the disparate networks in all 14 organizations. Back up, please. In all 14 organizations and basically combine them into one network. All along the way, hardening the cyber infrastructure and yielding the savings. So some of the questions that immediately come around the savings, and of particular interest to probably the community here today, you might ask, well, where does the savings come from? Well, I already kind of enumerated the number of duplications. I'm not touching it, I swear. It's the guy next door changing my slides for me. So that's fantastic. But nonetheless, let's see if we can go back here. There we go. I lost my train of thought now. So some of the savings comes from, as I said, the duplication of functions, right? So again, if you go back to that McNamara building kind of scenario, they all have their tier 2 desktop folks, right? They all have their own DISA connection that they're paying for. In fact, there are 630 contract vehicles in the space. 630 of them. The government management overhead on that alone is pretty staggering. So when you start doing and looking at the thread that runs through this, you start to see where some of those advantages particularly start to appear and where we can get cost savings and where we can improve the service and start to standardize and harden the infrastructure while lowering costs. So some ask, well, okay, how does this work exactly? Well, we've been working with the 14 agencies for the past 8 months and basically trying to delineate what is common use IT versus what is mission IT. So, for example, we're really looking at just commodity. And so a good example here may be And some people have made this argument. Well, my laptop, I use my laptop today to access my mission stuff. So isn't my laptop a mission asset? The answer would be it depends, right? If the laptop is a run-of-the-mill laptop that is accessing a web-enabled app, the answer is no. It's still a basic commodity type service. If, however, the laptop or desktop is uniquely configured, running uniquely mission-oriented apps, think global command and control system, it's probably mission. So we went down with all 14 agencies and we kind of tried to figure out where that dividing line is. And yes, I won't lie to you, you see those arrows there. There's some gray area in there about which side of the fence those things fall on. We're still working out some of the more, kind of tiny details in there. And it also inserts some interesting complexity with regards to accreditation from a cyber perspective. So, for example, imagine, if you will, that we've determined that the entire network is commodity and that everything associated with it is commodity, but we've got one server, like an island in the middle of an ocean, that is mission. Where is the accreditation boundary precisely? And who's managing that? So those are some of the things that we're trying to change and try to figure out how that works. And, of course, you've got the service desk aspects associated with that. Well, how do we make sure that the mission service desk that is performing mission support is also integrated tightly with the commodity support, and how do we do change management? I.e., I'm making a change to the network. How do I ensure that that doesn't impact MDA's missile telemetry systems? That's kind of important. Or how do I make sure that we don't impact DFAS's accounting systems? Everybody who works for the Department of Defense would like to get paid, I'm sure. So those are very important distinctions and things that we need to do from a process perspective while going into this. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what's this thing going to be called when we're all said and done? And this is where some of the confusion comes in. So yes, okay, you have three key phrases here. Fourth Estate Network Optimization, that's the program. That's me. That's the thing that DOD CIO is asking us to do. Then you have this thing called DOD Net. DOD Net will be the combined network once we've actually collapsed all 14 organizations into one unified network. And then you have the service, Defense Enclave Services. That is the service offering that we're building. And it's somewhat interesting in regards to the fact that it's basically a bundled service. Customers of Defense Enclave Services will effectively get all the way down to the desktop on a per-seat pricing basis, bundled enterprise services, DISA, and desktop services all in one, i.e., they won't be buying DIOS. I will be buying DIOS and giving it to them as part of the service. Same true for other enterprise services, etc. This enables us to manage the price vector, and of course, and if you can imagine, if we're going to the market space to buy some services, the buying power of the Fourth Estate essentially brings to the table. Things that DPAA, an organization about 300 users strong, cannot do on their own, right? So that's really kind of the approach that we're using. That's what the new service is. That's our new logo. We're happy that everybody's kind of come down to kind of hear what it is and what it isn't. I'm sure there's a ton of questions, but let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. Right? And so there's a general approach. And I'm going to have to put my glasses on for a second. Right? So there's a hybrid approach. It is going to be GOCO. So a lot of folks have imagined, well, is this EITAAS? It is not. It is a GOCO approach, but it will be a new network. There's probably a couple things I need to clarify on that too, because there is a DOD Net 1 and a DOD Net 2. And in order to avoid confusion, because some of you all are watching the other contract vehicle that potentially is coming, which is DOD Net 1, and that really is kind of a half step. The approach here is basically this. We're going to combine 7 networks down to one on DOD Net 1, which is essentially an evolutionary approach to get towards an end state of 8 networks. Those 8 networks then will be utilized and scrutinized for DOD Net 2, along with a huge investment, we hope, a huge investment that will take place roughly in 21 from the department to modernize and advance DOD Net 1 and the rest of the networks to this new thing called DOD Net 2. The RFI that's on the street is aimed at DOD Net 2, right? So it's the big build. The idea here is that we would recapitalize some of the hardware in the space and would literally do a greenfield redesign and rebuild of a new modernized network containing things like artificial intelligence, software-defined networking, automated fixlets, AI self-healing. You start to get the drift, right? That would bring the entire fourth estate essentially forward to kind of not quite cutting edge, but at least very close to it, so that we're completely modernized for the department, right? So I talked about the greenfield build, right? And then we talked about DOD Net 1. And the DES contract is a 10-year period of performance. It will be a single network with a single delivery model. And we're looking for the market research, essentially, to help build this case. So the department really isn't necessarily looking at making the investment unless we can demonstrate to them what the advantage is. So the MRR will play heavily into the business case analysis that we're trying to do for this fall, which will go before the folks at the Pentagon. And then from there, we imagine that the investment income will enable us to basically turn this boat from an evolutionary approach to a brand new, huge upfront investment to modernize and build this new network known as DOD Net 2. We'll be full and open competition, and well, that's most of it. That's most of what we came here to tell you today. So, like I said, I want to reiterate, the RFI is out on the street. It opened on Friday, and there's a video associated with it on the DISA YouTube site. Please go there and take a look at it. I would ask you that you direct questions about the RFI, obviously to the contacts on the RFI itself. Please do not stop me after this brief and start asking me questions about the RFI. We know how this works. But other than that, I think we're ready maybe to take questions. Trying to figure out how much time we got. Yeah. So I think we're ready for questions. So we have a mic. Yeah, please step to the mic so that everybody can hear you. And oh, by the way, this is being recorded. So if you don't step to the mic, then not everybody will get the benefit of the question.
Good
yes,
afternoon, sir. My name is Rob Anderson. I'm from IBM. Are you familiar with GSA's IDIQ Enterprise Infrastructure Services?
Yes.
Have you thought about leveraging those capability areas instead of a new contract vehicle?
We have.
And it doesn't fit?
I'm not going to comment further. Not to stonewall you, but the acquisition strategy is not really open to discussion at this point. Like I said, we're in the middle of an RFI and doing market research.
Yeah.
So the acquisition strategy isn't even fully formed yet.
Okay, because it appears to me there's an awful lot of overlap between those 14 capability areas that are listed in IES and what you're trying to do, especially from an economies of scale. I mean, that contract vehicle was created to support something exactly just like this, where you've got agencies within the federal space that aren't big enough to get what they really need unless they use something like that contract.
I understand what you're saying, and I didn't say no. I just said we've looked at it.
Check. And I'm assuming this slide stack's going to be on the AFCEA site?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Why, yes. Fred Rice with Computer World Services. This is an easy one, Drew. I looked at the video this morning. I thought probably the most informative piece of that was the slide that shows what parts of the services aren't really going to be in the contract. I'm just curious if you're not going to have that slide here, or are you able to talk about it at all?
Yeah, so he's referring to a slide that's in the video. In case you're wondering, the video slide deck is different than this. It's really aimed at the RFI itself, and there is one slide in there that really goes through item by item by item the types of services that we're looking to provide as part of DES. It's fairly comprehensive. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, there's literally like 60 items on it. I can't go through all of them, but it ranges from desktop services down to the service desk capabilities, to how we're going to do our licensing, to how we're going to integrate that with the network itself, how we're going to do software-defined networking, self-healing capabilities, all those types of things kind of listed in the service itself. Should be noted, though, that some of the things on that list are also, and you'll note in the video that some of them are actually have an air line through them. Those are things that are going to be consumed, enterprise service type things that are already available. We view that as a supplier for DES, and we will be working with them to provide the capability to our customer base. But they're also, more often than not, things that aren't crossed off. So hopefully that helps with that. And so again, I encourage you, I'm not going to go through that list in total here. In fact, I didn't even bring it, but it is on the site.
Hi, Lisa Gross with FireEye.
Yeah, I can't hear you. Can you?
Lisa Gross with FireEye. And I had mentioned this to you earlier. So many of the agencies are telling us that from a cyber perspective, they are holding off all decisions until for any kind of thing related to cyber, until they see what happens with this. As you know, the bad guys aren't holding back. Mm-hmm. They're still attacking. So my question is, timeline are the decisions for any changes or hardening for cyber going to wait until after this acquisition is awarded?
No. Okay, so as you can imagine, with an effort this big, the timeline is a little bit long, right? It's about 5-year timeline for the project in total. So there's a couple of aspects to get at what you're talking about. For those customers that are going to DoD Net 2, i.e. they're not part of DoD Net 1, and if we want to get down to specifics, DISA, DMEA, DPAA, DTIC, DMA, DCAA, and DCMA are all in DoD Net 1. The remainder of the people on the slide are aimed at DoD Net 2. DoD Net 1 customers, the first 5 that I mentioned, are essentially going in the next 12 months. We're actually already in build mode with them. That conversation is already happening. That's already, in fact, wrenches are already turning, right? So for those first 5, essentially, we did ask them to freeze the configuration until the migration is complete. The remaining 9 essentially are now part of a change management process for Fourth Estate Network Optimization and part of the EITPR. So the EITPR is a change management process that the DoD CIO put in place for the Fourth Estate that essentially they can continue to move down the road that they need to go, but they need to submit that change request through the process to verify that whatever long-term investment they're making is either in alignment with or not in alignment with the strategy and the direction we're going. I.e., if you're later downstream and you're in DoD Net 2 and you're like 3 or 4 years off before we start collapsing your network into DoD Net, then yeah, they have to continue to make changes. They have to continue to make upgrades. We just want to make sure that it's coordinated properly and that we don't make a long-term commitment that's completely out of alignment with strategy. Because it would be a shame to, because the other thing we didn't mention here, and I probably should mention, there's a lot of contract actions going on that are not related directly to the network collapse, right? For example, JLAs, CEDAs, enterprise license agreements. Again, the buying power of the Fourth Estate is such that we are trying to renegotiate some of these agreements. Those would be good for the entire Fourth Estate, and I don't just mean the 14. I mean all 32 organizations in the Fourth Estate, right? So some of those actions will literally tell the Fourth Estate, no, we're going this direction versus this direction, right? So that's why the EITPR, right? So if you submit a change request, say I want to do product X and I want to invest this much money to modernize this product, and we know there's a CEDA coming down the road that says, no, Fourth Estate's going to go this direction, we can then look at that and say, no, we really need you to point here, not there, right? But most of the Fourth Estate at this point knows what's going on in the space. So most of the change requests we're getting are really just situational awareness, and we're allowing the investment to proceed. because, as you say, the adversary doesn't wait. We need to continue to modernize. We need to continue to improve. But there are other things that are going to be done as a team, and those things need to be coordinated and make sure that we don't make, bad investments. As the timeline progresses, there are stop moments in there where we tell people, stop buying things, wait, because you're effectively next, right? And we don't want to wind up with a situation where we're buying product X, and that's not what the design is, right? And don't ask me what the design is yet, because there's more to come on that. So I'm not going to open that up to a product conversation. I can't hear you. For DOD Net 1, the agencies are DISA, DTIC, DMEA, DPAA, DMA, DCAA, and DCMA. Okay, what other questions do we have? Really? Nothing? This is your shot. I don't know when you'll see me again.
Hey, Drew. Christy O'Meara with Norseman Defense. With those agencies that are becoming part of DOD Net 1, it is my understanding that their IT staff is going to be splitting into both the mission and the standard, and those individuals that are not on the mission side are going to be integrated and become DISA employees effective October 1. Where are those employees going to be reporting to within DISA?
Okay, so that's a great question. In fact, that was one of the headlines that came up a couple weeks ago. So yes, you probably read the headline. DISA is going to be picking up close to 1,000. It's just shy of new employees. Those new employees are essentially coming from the mission, the common use IT portions of those agencies that are participating in DoD Net. Essentially, right now, it's a very simple answer. All of those people will continue to do the jobs they've done at the locations where they've done them, right? It's effectively, they're going to continue to operate the legacy network under DISA's guidance and DISA's operational control on October 1st, 2019, assuming the memo gets signed, right? Now, over time, those civilians, we're talking civilians, not contractors, right? There are 7,000 contractors in the space, roughly, just so you know. But those civilians, over time, as we head towards a campus-like environment, so if I'm a DTIC employee, for example, on October 1st, I'll still be supporting DTIC directly. Come, roughly a year and a half, 2 years later, as we start to move towards that campus environment at the McNamara building, they will no longer support just DTIC. They will start to support the campus. But there has been rumor and conjecture wandering around. In fact, some people have misinterpreted some things about whether or not any government employees will be shed. The short answer to that question is no. That's rumor, and that's not what's happening. It is a GoCo network. We plan on reutilizing the workforce that's already in place along with the expertise that comes with that workforce. We need those folks. So it'd be helpful if we kind of squash those kind of rumors right now. That's not what's going on. Now, on the contractor side of the house, yes, you're going to see some shifting as we try to move towards new requirements and create this new capability. That part's true. But the government workforce will remain fairly static. There's some duplication of functions, and we will have to realign some folks over time in order to fill new roles as the enterprise service starts to modernize and get more mature. But generally speaking, no change for most of those employees. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So are they going to be reporting up into SE6?
No. So they're going to be working for Mr. Means.
Okay.
So Mr. Don Means is the operational side. He's my operational component. He'll be operating the network that the program office builds, and the bulk of those 1,000 folks are going to his office. Okay. There's a few onesie-twosies that are coming to me, but generally speaking, the bulk are going to him.
Okay, thank you. And I had one other question. question, just for clarification, the RFI that dropped on Friday, just making sure multiples didn't, because 4E&O, DES, and DOD Net have been kind of used interchangeably. It is a DES RFI that dropped on Friday, correct?
It's Defense Enclave Services, DES. It does mention Fourth Estate in there. But again, to reiterate, Fourth Estate Network Optimization is the project, right? That's what I do. That's my project. DOD Net is the network. Defense Enclave Services is the service that is the bundled service, which includes everything down to the desktop, right? So they're not interchangeable, right? DES is everything. DOD Net is just the network. And 4E&O, well, that's just my program office, to be frank. Eventually the 4E&O designator goes away because it is envisioned that Defense Enclave Services could be consumed by anybody in the department. Doesn't necessarily have to be a Fourth Estate person. But the DOD CIO is driving that these 14 will participate right off the cuff. How else can I help?
Hey, Jason Miller, Federal News Network. You mentioned the Change Management Board, and since a lot of this is still strategy-wise under discussion, can you talk a little about the governance piece to this? How are you getting the 14 agencies, the 14 organizations to get along and play nicely? Because whenever you see a consolidation like this, even though it's DOD, one of the biggest challenges is getting everyone to march down at least the same path or the same road.
Yeah, so it's actually been going really well. So there's a couple of bodies that help govern us. There's a senior working group inside the Pentagon. The IT reform for the Pentagon right now is led by Ms. Danielle Metz. And she chairs a weekly meeting called the Senior Working Group, which basically provides governance and structure and direction for what it is we're doing. Then we have the ITPR, which is the actual change management process where Fourth Estate entities, anytime they're trying to change either an infrastructure piece or a contractual piece or a solutioning piece, they submit it up through there. That goes through our office basically for kind of a quality check, for lack of a better description, and then it goes up to DoD CIO for adjudication. And then, of course, there's the program stuff, and those involved directly with DoD Net 1. We have a kind of a subcomponent of the ITPR process that is change management just for DoD Net 1, and that means that the folks that are involved with that essentially submit their requests directly to my office, and we deconflict them at that level, and then we make investment decisions as a team. For the most part, it's pretty team-oriented. The requirements, for example, for the RFI that you see on the street was developed by all 14 agencies together. We actually had 2 summits, one virtual, one in person. Well, actually, I take it back. One partly in person and the rest virtual. But we had 2 summits to develop the requirements. And what you see on the street is really the product of that work. Very little, and I know this sounds maybe unusual, but very little uncooperative behavior from the Fourth Estate in any sense of the word. In fact, big agencies like DFAS, DLA, etc., really deserve a big shout out for helping drive this and helping kind of stabilize the front. They've been very, very cooperative, and we really have nothing but good things to say about everybody in the Fourth Estate at this point. So it's been, I like a challenge. I really love challenges, but in that particular case, it's been working pretty well. There was some concern from a personnel perspective until folks started to understand what the objective was, and so it's actually going very well. Most of the noise we're getting at this point is probably curiosity from the vendor community of what happens next, which is natural. What else?
I'm Don Turchi from IBM. My read of the RFI says that there's a service desk component associated with this, and my question is, how does this service desk interoperate with the Global Service Center initiative that's also on the horizon?
So the Global Service Center, which is a contract that many have bid on already, is The solution, essentially, for the next 4 to 5 years, DES is the end state. So if you're trying to kind of map, we had a half-step one initiative to get to the end state. You're going to see that a couple of times where we're going to have to do something to get to the end state because DES is a 10-year contract, doesn't appear for quite a while. There are 630 contracts in the space. We're trying to, as the new requirements start to develop, we're trying to get people pinned into the new requirements, and at the same time, that pares down the number of contracts in the space. So I would love to say to you that we're leaping straight to DES. It's going to take a while. It's a roughly $10 billion contract. So, and that's based on what we're spending today, right? So don't view that as an IGCE. That's not, right? That's just what we're spending today. That's public knowledge. In fact, it was pulled off of the spend plan webpage a few weeks back by some folks in the press. So you can imagine something that big doesn't turn on a dime, right? It's going to take a while to get there. In the meantime, we've got expiring contracts. We've got some contracts that are dying. We've got new capabilities we need to deploy. So GSC was the first big one to hit, but it will eventually be absorbed as part of the new requirement that is DES and the new network. What else? Nothing? All right. I don't know when you'll see me again. Wow. Okay. I guess I'm done, if you have nothing else for me.